for joining us for another episode of Chasing the Vision. I am joined again by Tim and JT, and we are talking about what it looks like to chase the vision of your company to reach whatever that vision looks like. Everybody has different goals for their business, different reasons for being a business owner or a manager or a leader, or whatever that may be. And so we are just talking about what it looks like to chase those visions effectively and help reach those end goals for businesses, whatever they may be. So today we're talking about the management team. In episode 1, we talked about an owner's involvement in the business and what a vision really looks like from the owner standpoint, and how much an owner should be involved, should not be involved, letting go of responsibilities, all that. So you can go back and listen to episode 1 if you missed it. And also, we would love to hear your questions. As you're listening to these episodes, please feel free to email me questions or drop them into the Facebook or LinkedIn posts that you're seeing, or email JT or Tim. We would all love to hear your questions, and we'll try to address some of them as we're recording more of these videos. We want this to be as interactive and helpful for the industry as a whole as possible. So of course, we're trying to lay the groundwork here, but we know that you all have many questions, and that's part of what this platform is meant for. So please feel free to reach out with your questions and comments as you're listening to all these. So, okay, we are again going into management team. And so JT, I'm going to have you kind of revisit the conversation that we had in the last video and set the stage. What does it mean for an owner's focus to move from that day-to-day involvement to the strategic involvement?
Just a quick recap. When it comes to owner involvement, and being able to extract an owner from some of the day-to-day, you've got to have the right people in place. As a small business, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be management, but at least have people in place that can take a few things off your plate. And without that, you're forever going to be staring at a full plate, which is an uncomfortable place to be. But as you grow and you've got to remove some of those hats, there's just not enough hours in a day. So you've got to know how to, or at least have a game plan to get the right people in place and what's needed for your business. And that can be very separate. Let's say you're asbestos only, a specialty in the industry. That's very different than maybe being mitigation only, or full service with layers of services beneath that. And so every business is different, but if you understand and aren't afraid of getting people underneath you, and understand how to delegate, understand the level of trust that's involved to do that, then you can begin to extract yourself from some of that day-to-day and really get to work on your business. But it takes some patience and some trust and some faith that it's going to work out.
Yes, perfect. Okay. All right. Tim, anything that you want to add from that ownership layer before we move forward into the management layer?
No, I think that was a good introduction by JT. And in the first episode, I think we could have gone into a lot more detail on the owner side about what's involved in really kind of giving it up a little bit in certain areas of your business. But identifying the right people is definitely part of the equation to get it off on the right foot, because so many business owners don't make the right hires, don't make the right promotions, or promote people too prematurely, and it fails. And then there's that reluctance. Nobody can do it better than me, so I'm just going to continue to do it myself. And that certainly doesn't aid our cause for building value in a business.
No.
Think one quick comment to that. I think historically owners have just hired to get butts in the right seat, right? Just get somebody in, we'll work it out as we go. And I think owners now in general are doing a pretty good job with personality assessments and team hiring and really getting the right fit. And I know, Tim, you and Violan probably assist with that, but I've seen a shift over the last 10 years that it's not just the right, the person in the seat, it's the right person in the right seat. And that exponentially helps moving forward.
We could probably do an entire series on hiring alone, even just for management level. Even if we're not talking about technicians and other issues that the industry has, we could do a whole series on this topic alone. But I think we have to lay the foundation here of how do you even create a management team to start with? Where do you look? So Tim, I'm going to start with you on this one. How do you identify and hire people for a management team? Is it okay to look outside the industry? I remember I was a recruiter in the industry for 4 years, for people that don't know that about me. And I remember a lot of owners being afraid to look outside the industry and to look at other talent that's out there. And it's just really difficult to discern what kind of talent and personalities and drive you really need from a manager because we're so restoration based. Like, I feel like our focus in our industry is so restoration focused that we have a hard time getting out of our own way. So what should you really be looking for in a good management kind of team, or those first initial hires?
Yeah, well, I can tell you first how people typically do it is they take their top producers and then they slap them on the back and they give them the title of boss or supervisor, and they say, okay, you're in charge, which is the worst mistake that you can make, right? Because then you kind of fall trapped to that Peter Principle thing where you're promoting a bunch of people to their level of incompetence. Look, I mean, you have to understand the position first. If you're going to hire somebody as an operations manager, you're not looking for the best project manager. As a matter of fact, you don't want to promote your best project manager because they're usually your top producer. You're looking for somebody that understands operations management first and foremost. The trade that we work in, the space of restoration, is science, yes, but it's not rocket science. I've said that for years. Somebody that comes from the hospitality industry, the manufacturing circles, or any of those other types of places, if they're an operator at heart and they understand efficiencies, they understand resource management and scheduling and all those other good things, they will learn restoration. Restoration can be taught. The other fundamental academic principles behind it are necessary. They're qualifications, but they're harder to teach, especially from within the industry. So to answer your question, Michelle, I would look at the position first and foremost and hire people for the qualifications. But of course, the overarching theme there is that they have to fit into your company culture. So we always use the core values of an organization sort of as a measuring stick. So regardless of how experienced they are or how qualified they are, if they don't fit the culture of your organization and believe in the core values, they're never going to work. So start there, then layer in the qualifications, then layer in the technical knowledge. And if you get the trifecta, great. If you don't, well, that's fine. But get the first two for sure.
Sure.
think
JT,
one-
anything you want? Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. One comment there is, I think restoration owners in general think they're in the restoration business, construction. And I think the most strategic owners realize they're in the people business and their people happen to do mitigation and restoration. And if you can fundamentally make that mind shift and go for the people first mentality, the rest of it can take care of itself, per Tim's comment.
Okay, so you have the right people in the right seats, but there's so much to this conversation. This might just turn into a hiring episode. I'm not entirely sure at this point, but Tim, you had even mentioned in the last episode the importance of properly incentivizing these people that are at the top of your business, especially if the owner is going to be more removed. So what have you seen as kind of more effective compensation structures? I'm not talking numbers, like not base salary. Obviously, salaries are different across the board, but how can you incentivize these people that are really at the top of the organization? This is a great, so for people that are listening, you should go back and read Tim's previous CNR article, which won a Golden Quill Award. It's on being first in line, second in command, kind of. And it's about being lieutenants in a company. So talk a little bit about that, and then kind of the incentivizing that needs to happen for these lieutenants to really make them effective and take really big ownership in the company.
Yeah. So where do you want to go first with that, Michelle? Do you want to go to the compensation?
It was a lot.
What it takes to be an effective lieutenant in a company. Let's tackle the incentive side of things first, and then maybe we can digress into the other stuff. I think if you look at the character of those individuals, and in some ways I'm looking in the mirror here, right? If you look at the characteristics of those individuals, they're usually very driven, and they're very goal oriented, but they're also a very type A personality. They're drivers by nature. So those of us who fall into that category, we're constantly striving to try to accomplish something, but we want to be in control of that path, whatever that journey looks like. So I don't think it's about having a big fancy compensation package or some major bonus program, but I think as long as those managers feel like they are in control of the outcome of whatever that is, allow me to decide how much I'm going to make based on the goals that I want to shoot for. That to me is really probably the most rewarding and incentivizing situation that you could create. Hopefully that kind of addresses the compensation side of things.
It did. Okay. So do you want to, okay. So let's move on to the article as well, because let's kind of keep talking about that and the lieutenant topic of, this is kind of creating these thoroughbreds that are in this position of running the company when the owner is able to take a step back and let go some. So what does it look like to effectively manage somebody at this level? I mean, somebody that really, it's like, you're the owner, but this person could probably ideally run past you, right? Like, we're supposed to hire people that are even smarter and more valuable than we are. So what do you do with them? How do you manage them? How do you lead them?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And it's kind of like the top producing salesperson in your company, like the best salespeople are also the hardest to manage. Yeah, I mean it's tough to put your reins around that individual. But I think that's really the key is you don't put the reins around them. But that individual, I'm going to kind of shift this around again, kind of back to the premise of the article is we get asked frequently, well, I want to hire a general manager. I want to hire an operations manager. How do I find those people? What do they look like and what makes them good at their job? How do I know it's going to work out? Because you're giving up a lot of control there. And I like to kind of look at it from the lieutenant's perspective because they owe an obligation to that owner to, there's a responsibility there, right? So in the article, we broke it down into 4 things, and these were really kind of the keys, what it really takes to run somebody else's business. The first was they have to have the ability to listen to the owner. And that means a couple different things. The owners have a lot to say. They're smart people. Their minds go a mile a minute. They're entrepreneurs, and there's good things that come out, every once in a while. There's a nugget there, and you have to be able to recognize that nugget, and file it away to use at the right time. The other things, maybe not so much so. You need to know what to put on the side burner and revisit at a later time. So, but it requires constant listening because you can't shut it off. You have to keep your ears open all the time. The second is try new things. And this is really where I think I see a lot of entrepreneurs fail their lieutenants or their management teams in the fact that they want to keep the reins around them so tight because they are thoroughbreds. They're afraid of letting them make a mistake. You're really just hindering progress at that point. People learn by nature from making mistakes. The cliche saying, you give them enough rope to try some new things, but, not enough to hang themselves with. Look, unless they're going to sink the ship, give them a little bit of leeway to play. Generally, what happens on the backside of that is there's enough lessons learned that start to stack up that the risk taking and the end results start to become better and better and better. And those people start producing. On the backside of that, though, the lieutenants also have to be able to accept responsibility for what they're doing. And there's a monumental responsibility that those individuals have, not just to the owner, but to the rest of the employees in the organization. And they need to be the first ones to step up and take ownership when things don't go well. Now there's a double-edged sword there because as a leader, you get to take responsibility for the things that didn't go well, but you don't get to take responsibility for the things that did. That's when you give it to your staff and you say, look, it was JT. He really made this thing happen. I was just along for the ride. But the last thing, Michelle, just to kind of, I know that we're running a little long-winded on this, but the lieutenants have to have the ability to sacrifice. Sacrifice as an owner. And a lot of times that's kind of where the line in the sand really gets drawn. They'll do everything up to that point, but when it comes to reducing my own pay or limiting my opportunities or sacrificing of my time to do things because somebody got let go or somebody got sick or there was an accident or whatever, you can't sit in the ivory tower in that glass office and say, well, that's not my job. We'll let somebody else figure out. No, you need to go out and get your hands dirty, just like everybody else in the organization. So those 4 things are really the premise of the piece that we wrote and I think hold true today.
Yeah. Yeah. JT, anything you want to add to that? And I have a fresh question for you, but I want to see if you have anything to add before I move on.
Yeah, I think Tim just used a pretty key phrase. He said sacrifice as an owner. And one of the complaints I always hear is I can't find the right people. Nobody wants to work as hard. Nobody wants to have a vision. And that's rare air, right? We've got owners who have laid it all on the line. They've mortgaged their homes. They went into debt on credit cards. They bought the building. They worry about payroll. Well, an employee isn't at that level. Maybe they're not expected to work as hard, but when you get one that is willing to sacrifice and they've got that owner's mindset, absolutely they're worth keeping. And how they're incentivized and how they're treated and the amount of range they do have, there should always be some guardrails, of course, that's without question. But to be able to turn them loose with an owner's mindset, it's one of the rarest things in the industry to get. And when you find it, you do what's able to keep that person. And it's astonishing to me. I have a lot of conversations around phantom stock and stock redemption plans and giving key employees with that owner mindset some level of ownership. Well, that almost guarantees an owner mentality. And it's shocking to me how many owners will step back and say, well, I don't want to give up 2%. Why would I give up 2%? Well, because that person's going to make your quality of life a whole lot better. And they're thinking of that as a win-lose scenario, not a win-win. And so I've helped many owners through that process. And I think it's one of the most valuable things we can do is help share in the reward if they're willing to come to the table with that sacrifice. It was great wording on your part, Tim.
Yeah. And JT, can we go there for a little bit with the idea of the needing equity or
Sure.
needing stock to have a sense of ownership? I think you can accomplish that with the right individuals without giving up equity in the business, or without issuing some sort of stock redemption plan formality there. Simply because there are people out there, there are individuals out there who are qualified, willing to have that owner mindset without being willing to take the risk associated with it. There are very intelligent business people out there that really have no care in the world to risk their financial well-being on a business,
right?
But they enjoy the heck out of running them.
No, it's very true. There's this is probably a whole nother topic. There's three types of buyers in the industry. On the smaller level, you get up through the SBA that's around 4, 5, 6 million. And these are what I call industry type buyers. They're the GMs, the PMs, the estimators. They're the people who are sort of tired of working for someone else and they want to run their own show. And sometimes owners can pacify that type of owner and mindset to stay at their company. And if they can't, they're going to call me looking for a business to buy. And that's it's unfortunate, but they want to be in command of their own ship. And then there's industry strategics, which is the top, we'll say the big 10 or 12 industry players. And then there's the private equity side, which of course is a whole nother discussion. But we're talking about these lieutenants who want to run their own ship. There's a lot of ways to keep them happy. You are correct. They don't necessarily need equity as long as they feel that they're being rewarded. A lot of ways to make that happen.
Perfect. Okay. So this is a perfect segue I want to go back to kind of the foundation of what this conversation is about, which is chasing vision. And we're talking about the management team. So once you have a manager in place, whether it's a GM or an operations manager, whatever, this upper level leadership, once you have these people in place, how does the owner impart the vision properly onto the management team? And then how can the management team effectively run with it and make sure that there's a checks and balances system once in a while to make sure that that vision is really being pursued in the right way and you're continually going in the right direction? I don't know who wants to take that one first, but you both could go for it.
Well, I'll set the stage for Tim. How's that? This is really his lane. Some people call me and their entire vision is, quote, I sure hope it's a harsh winter, or I hope it's a good hurricane season. And that's what they're hanging their hat on, which is astonishing to me. And every business should have a vision. Some are more grand than others. I think in part it's recognizing that owner should have a vision and not leave it to the weather or to pure chance whether or not it's going to be a good year. And I know, Tim, you've got a big smile on your face. I know you can run with this one, but it's astonishing to me how many people don't, and they really need one.
Yeah, I think to your point, JT, the purpose of a strategic planning exercise or having a business plan is critical to the juncture, Michelle. I mean, if you're going to really articulate a vision properly and you're going to constantly be able to clarify, you need a tool to be able to do it with. And that's the whole purpose of a strategic business plan. We see a lot of contractors, regardless of what industry they're in, they come to the table and say, well, what's your vision? Well, we want to be the best of the best. Okay, well, what's that mean? I mean, you can't criticize it, right? For somebody wanting to be the best, but it really doesn't give enough direction to the staff. So it isn't until you start breaking it down at more of the goals and the objectives level that it starts to become real and people can see it, touch it, smell it, say, yeah, I think we can get there. And here they start to put together the actionable plan that's necessary to do that.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So let's talk about trust as well. That's a big word that's come up a few times throughout this conversation so far in the last episode and this one. Trust is a huge component of hiring managers and being able to let go as an owner and let other people start running the company and taking some kind of quote unquote ownership in the company. So I would also love to kind of get into story time with this question of a time when either of you have seen an owner, you know, the value of them trusting in a manager or leader to really take charge of their company and lead it forward, and some amazing things that have come out of that, and then kind of flip flop it. Are there any horror stories out there of like, oop, we trusted the wrong person, like what Tim, like what you said, like we promoted the wrong person internally in the company and I had trust in this person, maybe in this role, it didn't work out. You know, it can kind of go both ways. So Tim, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I think it's pretty easy to see on the successful side of things. And the performance measurements behind all of this just kind of they flow, right? So you can see somebody that if you looked at their P&L or you looked at their balance sheet, you could go, wow, yeah, the owner understands the role that he plays, and the management team understands the role that they play. When it comes to trust really, I mean, there's a whole another discussion that goes on behind this, Michelle, but really at the end of the day, has to go hand in hand with performance expectations that you have of your staff. And the ones that do it well, again, they're well-run companies, but you can see it very clearly in that the management team has no question as to what they're expected to accomplish in their respective areas of the business. They know what their goals are, they know what their KPIs are that they're looking at, they know the metrics they have to hit, and they have a plan to get there. When we see owners that don't trust in that staff, that's where we get the meddling or the seagull management, people call it a lot of times, where the owner will say, yeah, hey, JT, I want you to do, increase sales by 30% this year. And instead of letting you do that, I will then constantly come and interrupt you and say, all right, well, who did so-and-so call on this week? Or why did so-and-so only have so many lunch appointments? Or how come we only wrote 30%, of the proposals we're supposed to write? I'm minoring in the details of the actionable items that you're really responsible for. And if I can't allow you to be responsible for them, then I might as well be running the business, micromanaging the business, at the end of the day. And that's what ends up happening.
So at what point should an owner step in those conversations? Like how long should the track record go of, because I can picture a lot of owners listening to this and being like, well, I want to know those answers to those questions though. Why aren't they doing those things? So
Right.
where's the line between hands off and then stepping back in and asking those questions?
Yeah, see, I think that's where the frequency and the quality of the contact with that manager comes in. If you have regular touch points, whether it's a scheduled one-on-one meeting every week or every other week or once a month as a management team, whatever those are, they come with agendas. They come with reports that get reviewed on a regular basis, including the leading and lagging indicators relative to those objectives and the goals that they are to accomplish. If you have that type of clarity and transparency with the measurement of those processes, it's very clear to see when things are deficient, right? So if you bring a status report to me, Michelle, and you say, hey, look, 30% of my objectives are not on track to be completed this quarter, then we're going to have a deeper discussion about the number of sales calls, the number of leads that came in, the numbers of proposals that were written. That way I can help you as a manager diagnose the problem and take the corrective action. But you can't lead with those things. You can't lead with picking on, something that is only a part of the end result. start with the end result, and then let the manager come to you with the request for assistance. That's where you then appear as an owner to be more supportive in that venture instead of nitpicky and micromanaging.
Nitpicky and micromanaging. JT, anything you want to add? Nobody likes nitpicky and micromanaging. That's
Just
for
one
sure.
quick comment. It's always an epiphany to me when many owners think that they can do it better than some of their managers, and they've had to do it for maybe years. And it's always a wonderful epiphany when they see someone or find someone who does do it better, and they realizing that backing off is the best thing to do. It's a dream come true for many of these owners. And if you can get to that point and recognize the talent, even if it doesn't necessarily have to be better. Maybe it's 80 or 90% of what you would have done. Oftentimes that's plenty good enough in the manager or employee role. It doesn't have to be exactly like you do it. Many of the same goals can be accomplished with different methods. Let them get out there and spread their wings a little bit.
Right. And look, JT, I don't want to alienate the audience or contradict you there too, but more to complement what you said. We see a lot of people that have healthy egos at the top of organizational charts, right? And they think that nobody can do it better than me. I like to tell my clients, if that's the case, then you're lousy at hiring. So we've got something else we can work on now. But look, we can't all be that full of ourselves to think that there aren't people out there that could do it a better job at it, or at least a better version of the way that we can do it. Otherwise, you might as well just be punching the clock all day.
And Michelle, earlier you mentioned maybe success stories, or on the flip-flop, maybe a horror stories. And one quick one, and I'll make this quick. Earlier this year, I'm working on a multi-location business in the upper Midwest, and I take potential sellers through quite a list of questions, and I ask about the day-to-day and their strategic activities. And I noticed that this individual said he answers the phone after hours. Now, if this were a 3 or 4 person firm, I would think that's fairly normal. This was 125 employees with more than 5 locations. He still answered the phone after hours. And I said, why is it that you do that? You should have some people in place. He goes, well, you got to make sure it's done right. And so when I delivered this report, I said, I have a feeling you have a pretty tight grip on your business. Both he and his wife started laughing, and he said, I've been accused of worse. That's how tight of a control he had. And it was challenging, to say the least.
Not to mention that limits growth.
Oh, absolutely.
You can only do that for
he literally couldn't get out of his own way.
Yeah. Everybody's got a capacity. They hit their limit. Maybe the limit of his company, the potential for his company might be twice that size, but because of that, what you just described, JT,
yeah, correct.
He'll never get past where he's at today.
Yeah.
So, okay. So before we wrap it up, I've spoken a lot to managers and owners here, but speak a little bit to the managers who are in maybe this lieutenant role and could use a little encouragement on, leading the charge toward this overall vision. What advice would you give a lieutenant at a restoration company who's like, I am really chasing this and really going for it, but sometimes the going gets tough. And how do you kind of see the water through the trees, whatever, I can't remember what that phrase is, but you get it, see through the trees to see what's on the other side of it.
Yeah, the forest for the trees.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of liken this one to being the backup quarterback on a football team, Michelle. If you look at the pros, you've got your franchise quarterbacks of the world, and then you've got your backups. And if anybody follows football this year, there's been a record number of backup quarterbacks that have played. I forget how many. I think I heard somewhere that there was like 90 different quarterbacks that have started so far this year, and the year's not over yet. If you look at how that individual behaves, they understand their place in the world. They understand their roles and their responsibilities. As lieutenants in an organization, if you fancy yourself to be the owner, or as a backup quarterback, you fancy yourself to be the starter, you're not going to be as good at your current position because you're always, feeling slighted some way of not being that other thing. But if you really lean into and embrace the role that you play, it becomes much easier to execute on that vision. and get others to follow you than to walk through the world in resentment all the time. Does that help? I know it was kind of maybe
Yeah.
philosophical and maybe not what you're looking for, but the mind's got to be there before everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I kind of want to go ahead, JT.
I was going to say, adding on to that, you asked what that lieutenant would do. And I think many times those lieutenants don't ask enough questions. If they don't know what's expected of them, and it's so well defined now that they should be going to an owner saying, is this what you're expecting? How does the industry work? What should I be producing? How efficient am I? How are our conversion rates? Where do I stack up? Where can I use some help? What if I got some training and some coaching? You know, where do you see me fitting in to the overall success of the business? Help me get better at what I do. And owners will welcome that all day long. And I don't think it gets asked enough by them on how to improve.
JT, the picture that comes to my mind when you say that is kind of climbing that mountain, and we've all probably seen those teamwork posters where you've got the leader who's reaching down and pulling their staff up to the next plateau, or pulling themselves up to the stomach, or to the summit rather. There's another component to that though. On the manager side, I believe that the best managers, you can recognize them because not only are they accepting of the following the leader to the summit, but they're also the ones that are reaching up the organizational chart and starting to pull responsibility down towards them. It's not just through delegation that they understand the things that they need to do in a company. They're the ones that are going out and looking for it and understanding that, hey, I've got to take things off of that owner, or I've got to take things off of that management or leadership team so that they can focus their efforts in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, JT, bring us home a little bit. We talked about in the first episode, which was about owner involvement, the value of owners being replaceable, unfortunately. But talk about the value that a team brings to the table. If the overall vision is for an owner to eventually sell the company, what value can a really, really solid management team bring to the table when you're doing evaluation?
It's an excellent question. And one of the big fallacies is owners think they have to work themselves out of a job, and they don't. They don't have to completely work themselves out of a job. That's very difficult to do. It's been done, but it's difficult. As long as they can work themselves into a strategic position, that's really a solid place to be. And when a buyer comes along looking at a company, much of what they're buying is a team and the systems and procedures that are in place. They're not just buying the owner. Without the team, nothing happens. You know, let's say you take a typical $10 million company. There might be $1.5 million, $1.8 million in hard assets. So we're looking at $8 million plus of goodwill that's intangible. There's a whole lot of intangible value there, which a whole nother conversation that's found in the adjusted EBITDA, et cetera. But that team is the A team that's got to carry this vision forward. And so they want to know that there's a lot of industry experience. They want to know there's a lot of character and sort of stick-to-itiveness and that sacrifice that Tim mentioned earlier. Without that, they're going to fall flat. And one of the things I always bring to their attention is, let's say there's 5 or 6 key employees in a company that size. I want to look at their years of industry experience and how many years have they spent at this company. Because it's very different if your collective team has 120 years of industry experience and 85 have been spent with this specific company versus 11 years of industry experience and 3 have been with your company. Both teams might be getting the job done. One is significantly more capable than the other, and they can handle so many more scenarios that don't or won't float their way up to the top to that owner. So the tenure and experience of that team and the ability that they have to solve problems is everything to the buyer.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Anything that either of you want to add before we wrap it up on the management topic? We're going to be talking about professional sense in the next video series. So I'm just going to tee that up a little bit, which is talking about the overall company. We're taking a step back from talking about the owners and the management team, and we're looking at the overall company and what that looks like as far as chasing a vision goes. So, all right. Anything else that you two want to add before we wrap it up?
Nope, I'm good.
Or to the next one.
I am as well. All right. And for everybody who's listening, thank you for tuning in. And please feel free to interact with these videos wherever you're seeing them, whether it's on YouTube or on Spotify or Facebook or LinkedIn or the CNR website or wherever it may be. Please interact, ask us questions, email them to us. We would love to interact with you and answer questions on a future video as well that you are having as you listen to all this. Thank you so much.